This is The Bottom Line. The Bottom Line on 938 Live.
Now, it's a little-known fact that property buyers from 5 countries are exempted from paying the additional buyer's stamp duty, or ABSD. Citizens of the US, Norway, Switzerland, Iceland and Liechtenstein are treated as Singaporeans when investing in properties, and they don't pay ABSD on their first purchase. A typical foreigner, on the other hand, will pay a 15% ABSD to own a home in Singapore. Now, the reason for the exemptions are the terms in free trade agreements, or FTAs, that Singapore has with these countries. According to the Urban Redevelopment Authority, buyers from these countries make up only about 1%, or 54 transactions out of almost 4,400 sales in the first 5 months of this year. Going forward, Edmund Sim, partner at law firm Appleton Luff and lecturer at NUS Law School, tells 938 Live's Travis Teo that future FTAs are not likely to have such a clause for stamp duty exemptions.
Well, this dates back to the earliest free trade agreement that Singapore had, which is with the European Free Trade Association. And that's a group of European countries, including Norway, Switzerland, Iceland, and Liechtenstein, that have a free trade agreement on their own outside the EU. And in that free trade agreement, Singapore explicitly committed to treating those countries, their nationals, the same as Singaporeans.
Right, and it's similar as Singaporeans. Is this only for property investments or what?
No, it's for everything. So as a result, nationals from these countries are treated as Singaporeans for almost every aspect of investment into Singapore. The Americans have their own free trade agreement with Singapore, and there are 2 clauses that also require the Singapore government to treat American nationals the same as Singaporeans with regard to taxation.
Do you think that going forward, is there a need for Singapore to renew the FTAs with the US and the 4 European countries? And do you think that the clause should be changed?
Well, first of all, these free trade agreements are indefinite in duration. And second, even if Singapore wanted to have changed the reservation, it's a matter of whether the trading partner is willing to accept this. One thing that has come up is that the number of buyers coming from these 5 countries is relatively small. The impact of the influx of people and investment coming from these 5 countries is not enough to really affect the market. Mm-hmm. So the bigger issue for Singapore is more of a defensive issue, which is not to let anyone else have this kind of clause and to sort of resist the pressure from countries like China or India, which have many more nationals coming into Singapore, from getting similar treatment to the United States than the 4 European countries.
That brings me to the point of the EU-Singapore FTA, which has yet to be ratified. So does it mean that there is no clause stating that the EU nationals will be treated like Singaporeans in terms of property investments?
Well, the investment part of the EU-Singapore FTA is still under negotiation. And I have a feeling that this issue is, of course, quite sensitive for Singapore and is probably one of the issues that both governments want to have addressed. However, given the larger number of Europeans that could come in, namely from France, Great Britain, or Germany, I think that would be a very large barrier to Singapore agreeing to the similar type of treatment, especially because these are countries with large expat populations with money that is highly mobile.
Right, so would you say that it's like a 99% sure that this will not happen?
I would say it would be very highly unlikely that the final text would have that kind of clause. I mean, since the very first free trade agreement with the 4 European countries, Singapore has, by and large, avoided giving treatment even to countries such as China and Japan, which have huge investments in Singapore.